Playbook 2020, I cannot believe how fast today has gone. Hopefully you've gotten so much value between the kickoff, the 5 panels, and we are going to close it out with this last session that I am super excited for. So I'm excited. I'm honored to have Jason Pfeiffer here. He's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. He's going to talk to us about embracing change to fuel future growth. So everyone knows this year has come with no shortage of challenges, but as things start to level out and turn a corner and we're thinking about next year, we need to figure out how to actually embrace the current environment. And how can you figure out what's working and pour gas on the fire to grow before your competition does. So we're going to talk about that and more with Jason. We're going to go through his strategies, tactics for staying agile and using change to your advantage. So as I mentioned, Jason's editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. No big deal. He's also the host of podcasts Problem Solvers, Hush Money, and The Pessimist's Archive, which shares failures as stories that you can learn from. Pretty cool. Before Entrepreneur, Jason was previously an editor at Fast Company, Men's Health, Maxim, and Boston. So this guy has a pulse on what's going on in the world. And there's no more fitting way to end today than for him to give us some advice on how to navigate our world. What's up, Jason? Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I apologize to anybody who can hear a hum in the background. I don't know if you can, but I live in Brooklyn, but I'm out here in Colorado because of the pandemic. And the thing I didn't know about the suburbs is that people are mowing their lawns all the time. They never stop mowing their lawns. It drives me crazy. Stop for a minute with the lawn mowing. So anyway, that's what's going on outside right now.
I was at my mom's over the summer in Massachusetts, and it was the same thing. It was like anytime I had a podcast, the landscapers someone would call the landscapers and they would come by.
I thought that the suburbs were going to be quieter than the city, but no, they're so much louder because the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers, just stop it for like 2 minutes. Like the grass is going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Well, I don't know how well you know Colorado, but I think there is a bear behind you. So please be careful.
Yeah. So fortunately that bear poses no threat to me, but we have seen 2 actual live bears while we've been here. This place is no joke. The bear that we got closer to was hanging out in a tree in a neighborhood, and we got pretty close to it. But that bear was chilling. Like that bear understood nobody's coming to it. It can just hang out.
Yeah.
That bear was fine. So this bear is fine.
I'm curious, what took you to Colorado? Is it just for fun? Are you working remotely from there?
I'm working remotely. So in normal times, my family, I'm married. I have 2 little boys, a 5-year-old and a 21-month-old now. And we have a small 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. And that was just not the place to be in indefinitely if we could avoid it. So the day that schools shut down, we came out here to where my parents are because, they're in like the suburbs. There's like a park and there's room to move around. And we just figured it was going to be better all around. And it has been, although I do miss Brooklyn.
I hear you. Yeah, I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old boy. So basically same boat as you. And it does help to be able to go outside and go to the park, kill some time. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So before we get into change, you as the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur run, I'd say the biggest publication for us entrepreneurs, small businesses. A lot of people have talked about PR today and getting noticed and organic reach. And so from your standpoint, can you explain the best way to get noticed by a publication?
Oh yeah, sure. So I think this is a multi-step process, and we could spend quite a while talking about it. So I'll just start with the basics and then see where you want to go with it. Yeah. I think the biggest problem that I see when people try to get press is that they don't really know what they're trying to get it for. People will reach out for one reason or another. The kinds of pitches that I get are nuts. If anybody follows me, feel free to follow me on Instagram at HeyPfeiffer, HeyFeifer, because I'm often posting screenshots of really bad pitches that I get. I black everybody's name out, so there's nobody's getting embarrassed. But because I feel like it's important to learn from. And a big thing that happens is that people reach out and I feel like if I sat down with them and I said, why did you just pitch me? Their answer would have been some version of, because isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Right? Like I'm supposed to get press and I don't know what it's for. And it's like, you can't do that, right? If you're going to go out and raise money, you don't do it just because it's something I'm supposed to do. Like you don't, right? And you don't go to an investor without really a clear understanding of the amount of money that you want and what you're going to do with it. And you need to think about that with press too. So the number one thing that I say is step back and think to yourself, what do I need this for? It's a tool. So what do I need it for? And there are plenty of really good answers to that. I got a new product launch and I need to drive customers. I'm about to go out and raise a fund, raise a series, and I need investors to take me more seriously or show that I have some traction in the market, whatever it is. Those are great. Bad is like, oh, I deserve it. We've reached a certain point in our trajectory where we want to tell our story. We want to inspire. That's garbage. Don't do that. It's like, don't waste your time on stupid things. And then once you have identified what specific thing you want to get out of press, then at that point, it's time to start thinking about which publications can get you that thing, because different publications are going to get you different stuff. So if you get into Entrepreneur, for example, you're probably not going to be driving a lot of sales, but what you will be doing is looking very good to investors. So like that's a place to target if you want to position yourself that way. But if you have a certain product, and let's say that product is for men ages 20 to 35, right? Like go to a consumer, and what you want to do is drive sales, then go to Men's Health or go to some consumer focused publication that's reaching that audience. And then once you've identified that, and I'll start talking in a second, once you identify that, what you need to do is dive into those publications and get an understanding of what they're writing about, how they're writing about, how they think about and treat their audiences, and then what writer or editor can you target and try to tell your story in a way that they can imagine telling it in the publication.
Okay, so much in there. First, I love that you're posting on Instagram the pitches, the bad pitches that you get. I do the same thing with the LinkedIn requests I get. I screenshot them and say like, this is garbage, black it out, black it out. What is the framework for a good pitch then? Do you want people to tell you, hey, I'm looking to get investor interest, or we're launching this product and I think you've got this angle? Like, what's the way to share the pitch?
Right. So no, you're not reaching out to me or to my peers at any publication with like telling me what your business goal is, right? Because keep in mind, I serve two roles here, right? I am at once a journalist and an editor who makes decisions about what goes into a publication. But at the same time, because I'm also the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, also I'm really an advocate for entrepreneurs. So I'm speaking to you in kind of dual roles here, but speaking as just purely the journalist, and my background is being just a regular editor at a lot of publications, a journalist does not care about your business. They don't care about your business. What they do care about is their reader, because that's who they're serving, right? They're not serving you. They are not in the service bit. Like they're not a service provider for you the way that if you hire a publicist, that is a service provider for you. The journalist is not that. The journalist is serving their audience. So what you need to do is understand how the journalist and how the publication is serving their audience so that you can come to them with information that fits into the way that they share information. So I'll give you an example because I know that that's abstract. Entrepreneur, let's just pick out like Entrepreneur, God, this is under a pile of crap. Like Entrepreneur Magazine, we're talking about just like a print, the print magazine, right? Because the digital is somewhat separate. The print magazine. So if you flip through this, what you're going to see is that this is really a magazine about problem solving. It's not a magazine about success and telling you just like who's successful and what they're doing and all the cool stuff. It's not. It's a magazine about how entrepreneurs are solving problems. And so what we're always looking for is insights from entrepreneurs about how they faced a very relatable challenge and then how they overcame it in a smart, almost counterintuitive way so that we can share smart thinking, right? Like I think of this less as a business magazine and more of a thinking magazine. It's a magazine of smart thinking. So here's a great pitch to me. A great pitch, just real short. I heard this is like one of my favorite pitches ever. I heard from this woman. Her name is Joelle. She has a butter dish called Buttery. And here's the thing about butter. Maybe you didn't know it, but you don't have to refrigerate your butter. You can leave your butter outside the refrigerator. It gets nice and soft, way easier to spread on bread. The problem is that if you have a butter dish, like, you like pick it up, right? You're going to bump into the butter all the time. Now you got a big buttery mess. So Joelle came up with a solution: butter dish on a hinge. So smart. Now you know exactly where the butter is. You know where the thing is going to land. Great, right? Now that is solving a problem in the marketplace. That's not what I'm talking about when I say solving problems, because every business, every product solves some kind of problem. So that's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is what she told me about how she developed the product. So she wanted to do some market research. She wanted to understand what's the price point on this thing. What are the colors that people are interested in? She went to a company, asked them, how much is it going to cost for you to do the research and find the answers to this? And they said $10,000. She did not have $10,000. And so she's trying to figure out what to do here. And now see, look what I'm talking about, relatable problems. You may not care about butter dishes or whatever, but you do care about, like there's some kind of service that I need in my business. I don't have $10,000 to spend on it. That's so relatable. So what we do, or what she did, is thought. And then one day she's flying somewhere. She had somewhere to go, and she's sitting at the airport, and she realizes that an airport is full of people in normal times, harder in the pandemic, full of people who have absolutely nothing better to do than answer questions about butter dishes, right? Like just nothing better to do. They're just sitting there. And in fact, it's so great because you can start at gate 1, and by the time you get to gate 8, there's like a whole new set of people at gate 1, and you could be there forever because you could book a 10 p.m. flight, right? One way, an hour away that you're never going to get on because it only costs you $90, and you show up at 9 in the morning and you could be at the airport all day. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to know. So this is how she did it. This is how she did her market research. That was the pitch to me. And that went into the magazine. I don't care about her butter dish. I don't care about the food marketplace. I don't care about any of that, but I do care about great problem solving, and telling me that story is what worked.
And so post-pandemic, there's going to be entrepreneurs everywhere flooding the Southwest terminals with their $99 tickets to do market research.
Exactly. It's a great space. I mean, listen, given the state of the airline industry, I think that they will welcome all purchases.
They should have landing pages for just R&D tickets. Like, you're not going anywhere, just you talk to the customers.
Right. It's a great secondary line of business.
So I know as a CEO, I get pitches all the time that are not appropriate for me because it would be someone else on my team that's supposed to handle that. It's like an HR service, and that should be our people ops team or something for the sales team. Right. Do you get pitches all the time that really should be journalists or writers? And who is the right person to pitch at a magazine?
Yeah, absolutely. People pitch me all the time. I don't think people are thinking about it this way, but you're really, the higher up you go, the more you're betting some kind of crazy odds, right? Because if something lands in my inbox and I really love it, it's got a fast track into the magazine. It doesn't really have to pass any other review process. But the problem is that my inbox is insanely full, and I'm doing a ton of things, only a fraction of which is deciding what goes into a magazine. And therefore it's, the chances of being overlooked are significant. So I always advise the different publications, different staff structures, all that. But I feel like if you're going to pitch an editor, shoot in the middle, find like an associate or a senior editor. Better yet is to spend a little time on social media and see what these people are interested in. Because what tends to happen at publications, some publications have beats. So a person is on the transportation beat, or they're on the tech beat, or whatever it is. But then there are other publications where everyone's kind of a generalist, but at the same time, everybody has carved out some interest set, and it just is different per person. And you will get a sense of that pretty quick if you follow them on social. And I think if you follow an editor or a writer on social, because you can also pitch, you can also pitch writers, you don't just pitch editors. If you follow them on social, one, you'll get a better sense of them, but two, you can also start engaging with them. Yeah. Because there's no better way to get on someone's radar than to not pitch them. Right? Like if you pitch that, if you are in a position of getting pitched all day, which I am, or like the majority of people who reach out to me are looking for something transactional, that I'm instantly filtering all that out. But people who reach out to me and are not transactional, they get through pretty quick. And I'll engage with them and respond to them. And I've had people who have built some kind of relationship with me just through commenting and whatever for a long time before they ever tell me anything about them. And at that point, I'm more invested in them because this is just human. We're dealing with humans who just have jobs, and you got to think about how people think.
Totally. Okay. I'm curious, in your experience at the magazine, how has the type of entrepreneur that we celebrate changed over the years? When you think about the person on the cover, whoever it is it that you're always celebrating the problem solvers? Did it used to be big IPOs and building big brands, or has it changed over the last few years?
Well, so there are two ways to answer that. Number one is what's the environment, and then number two is what's our conscious decision as a publication. Mm-hmm. So the environment, I came into Entrepreneur about 5 years ago. And at that time, I took over a magazine that had really been thinking about itself, and a brand that had been thinking of itself purely as we are like an SMB, a small, medium-sized business brand. And we serve people in that way. The magazine, again, the print magazine used to have it had like a tools section, and it had a money section where we would talk about like tax tips and whatever. And it's like, what I think about tax tips? You could find that in a million other places. You don't need to pick up Entrepreneur to find the tax tips. So I realized something, because I came into Entrepreneur originally as executive editor, which is the number 2. And then I rose to editor-in-chief about 9 months later. And I was going out to these conferences, and I was talking to entrepreneurs, and I was meeting all of these people who asked me this same question that at first I thought was some kind of trick question, and then I realized was actually very insightful. And it was, what's your definition of an entrepreneur? And the reason that turned out to be a very insightful question is because I realized that nobody has a definition for this, because everyone is coming in at this point from so many different vantages. Like an entrepreneur has ceased to be a singular definition of a kind of work, or even a level of work. It is now really a mentality. It's an identity. It's a badge of honor. People call themselves entrepreneurs without owning their own business. They have side hustles and they're an entrepreneur. They're an intrapreneur, right? There's a million ways of thinking about it. And so I thought this brand has to stop functioning as if it's just talking to people who are doing a specific kind of work and have a specific kind of business. And let's start talking about the thing that they all have in common. Because if you get 500 people who call themselves entrepreneurs into a room, pre-pandemic, or I guess everyone's 6 feet away.
Really, really large room. Yeah,
really large room with great ventilation. If you do that, the one thing that they're all going to have in common is the experience of entrepreneurship, the emotional experience of entrepreneurship, of feeling like lonely and crazy and trying to problem solve your way through everything. That's the only thing that they all have in common. But the thing is, that's also something that I don't think is very well served. Right? Like most publications are talking about tactics, they're talking about fundraising, whatever. Nobody's really serving that. And so I said, there's our opportunity, is to start talking about smart thinking and start talking about like hard stuff, but about how there's great ways to think about it. Think of this as a brand about change and about embracing change and about problem solving. So that's how I talk to them. And so we made that shift, I think, in line with the marketplace of people who think about themselves as entrepreneurs. I also wanted to be very mindful. I kept previously, one of the places that I worked at was Fast Company. And a thing that really bugged me about working at Fast Company was at the time, it has a different editor-in-chief now, and I pay less attention to what it does these days. But back when I was working there, it was very, very obsessed with a kind of Silicon Valley-ish company that was entirely focused on like innovation and disruption, but really didn't have to care about revenue at all, right? Because they were all operating in this parallel economy of venture capital. That's like cool if you can get there, but that's not most readers. And I hated that because I just didn't think that was relevant to most people, right? Like I can't, if I'm running a bootstrapped business and I don't have access to Mark Andreessen, like just, hearing about what Elon Musk did yesterday is just not relevant to me. And so I wanted to make sure that we sometimes talk about tech companies, but when we do, I'm like zeroing in on the stuff that anybody can find useful and staying away from these kind of magical economies that I just don't think the majority of people who call themselves entrepreneurs have access to.
So it's more about the emotion and the experience that binds everyone in the group. And the entrepreneur found this angle on how to approach that market of more readers and to do it in a unique way. So have you developed a more concrete definition of entrepreneur or entrepreneurship yet?
Yeah, I say an entrepreneur is someone who makes things happen for themselves. That's my definition. And so the funny thing about that is that you can say that to anybody at any level and everybody likes it.
Yeah. I love it. One of our core values is make ideas happen. So
yeah,
it's baked in here. All right. So we want to talk about change. And I know change can come from, the world. It can be like COVID, competition, regulation, or change can come from inside your business, just customer feedback or intuition that you have. So as a business owner or leader, how do you suggest that people spot when change is percolating?
Yeah. So great question. So much to say here. It's a big subject. There are lots of ways to think about it. So let me just tell you, let me start with this. I feel like this is an important way to just identify our own relationship with change, which is important. So, I have this prop from when I give like keynotes, but I'm just going to share it with you. So this is Blue Bear. This is my actual childhood teddy bear because here I am at my parents' place and they hung on to it. So this is Blue Bear. His name is Blue Bear because he's blue and he's a bear, and I was not an imaginative child, I guess. And and so the reason I'm showing you Blue Bear is because what could be wrong with Blue Bear, right? What could be wrong with this? We've all had our own Blue Bear, cute, cuddly, gave me so much comfort. But here was the thing: this guy was terrifying, absolutely terrifying in 1907. So here's what happened in 1907. The teddy bear was a brand new invention, had just come. It was invented in Germany a few years before. It had just come over and it was just making its way into the marketplace. And people in the United States of America, coast to coast, were freaking out about the teddy bear, absolutely apoplectic about the teddy bear. There were schools were banning the teddy bear, priests were preaching about the teddy bear. And why? The answer is amazing. It's because there was this logic at the time, and the logic went like this: girls play with dolls. That's the natural thing that they do. And because they play with dolls, they develop a maternal instinct. And if they develop a maternal instinct, they can grow up to be mothers. And, let's keep in mind the kind of gender dynamics of the time. So this is the way that people are thinking. If you bring in a teddy bear and the teddy bear replaces the doll, then the girl will not develop a maternal instinct and she will not grow up to be a mother. And that's the end of the human race. That's what people were arguing. And so this is very scary right now.
Tons of veterinarians.
It's very right. And this is right. It's just this is the next horror movie is the invasion of the teddy bears. So why am I telling you this? The reason I'm telling you this is because that is everything, literally everything that you are and that you do and that you know and that you like had some version of that kind of resistance. You looked in a mirror today, people went crazy over the mirror. You had coffee today, people tried to ban coffee for 500 years. It goes on and on. You come from the future, which is to say that you, me, we're all of us on this call. We are all the products of change. We are all from somebody else's future. Everything that we are, our life, our lifestyles, our habits, our interests, the technology that we use, the clothing that we wear, all of it was new and scary to somebody who came before us. But we don't think that we are new and scary. We don't think that we are a collection of terrible things. We think that we are a collection of good things. So good, in fact, that when change comes to us, we say, stop it. Stop. I have all the good things, right? These are the natural things. This is the stuff. This is how it's supposed to work. And now you're going to ask me to change this? No, we can't do this. And yet, if you remember that you literally are the evidence that change can be good, you are the evidence that the thing that comes next isn't bad, then you can release yourself and become a part of the next chapter, that you can shape what comes next. And I feel like the challenge that we all have is that we understand that intellectually and we participated in it at some point. We've all built something and we change something, and we got to a place where we felt like we built this thing, and then we get comfortable, and then we totally forget what we came from. And instead, we become these defenders of a status quo, even if we don't think of ourselves that way. That is what we tend to do. And so what we need to remember is that we come from the future, and also that we never replace. We integrate, right? Like one of the things I think that we're afraid of with change is that we fear that something new is going to come along. It's going to like wholesale replace everything that came before it. And everything that we're comfortable with is now going to disappear and just be replaced by this new thing that we don't know, and we don't like, and whatever. And that's just not what happens, right? We have teddy bears and we have dolls. We have bicycles and we have cars. We have radio and we have television. We never just like wholesale replace. We always integrate. And that means that we have an opportunity right now to take the best of the old and the best of the new that we are a part of creating ourselves and create something that's even stronger.
Wow. So then would the place to look for change be where there's the most outrage or resistance, or, how do you listen for that? Where do you find those things?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that sometimes it comes from, let me remind you of a thing that I think we've all done, but maybe not have thought about it this way. At this moment, we have in the last, however, since March and everything shut down, right? We have, whether we thought about it or not, we've done a kind of reconsideration of the impossible, which is to say that there were like ideas that we had before that we said, oh, I don't need that, or that's not good, or that's never going to work, or that's too radical of a change, or whatever it is, right? And then lots of avenues, lots of our normal operations got radically altered during this time. And so we had to look for other solutions. And what we found often, as I'm hearing and I'm talking to entrepreneurs, is that like stuff that we just literally hadn't considered before because it just seemed bad or impossible or too much of a fuss, that it was a good idea, right? Like, I mean, I'm hearing from something as basic as, I was talking recently with a woman who runs a performing arts center in Georgia, and she used to run big classes because she thought that that was the only way in which she could run a functional business that was going to drive enough revenue. And now she's been forced to run these much smaller classes, and she's discovered that like the students are happier, the staff is happier and less stressed, and also her marketing budget is zero now because it's small classes, so it's easy to fill up, so she doesn't have to market them, which means that her margins are exactly the same. So she's running a better business with smaller classes, which she knew was always an option, but she thought it was impossible. And I think that oftentimes what we do is we're surrounded by ideas and we just don't consider them. We don't think that it's worth exploring things that are not on whatever our preset path is. And this should be a lesson that we can carry into the future, that in fact, sometimes the greatest ideas are the ones that we have already discarded or we never even thought to pick up and take a look at. And so what do? I think that we need to take this moment, remember it, and then next time, always be mindful that change is not optional, right? The future is not an optional thing. Like change is going to come. And therefore we have two options, which are one, we can like sit around and wait for it to come to us and then scramble to respond. Or two, we can be extremely proactive so that the very second that we see that something isn't working as well as it could, or that growth isn't in the trajectory that we wanted to, that we say, okay, this is part of a longer term project, a longer term problem, and we need to address it now, now, right? Like shut the Blockbuster stores down when everybody's still coming into Blockbuster, so we can start building for the future instead of waiting for Netflix to just pull the rug out from us. Like you got to act in advance.
Yeah. We had for years, since we started, we had required a credit card to start a trial of the software. And back in March, when all this went down, huge flood of traffic, but we weren't seeing a big uptick in signups. So we said, take the credit card away. Let's let people try it. And it has changed the whole business because of how many people get in there and do it. But we were afraid to do it before. So I think, it's if you can just take those risks that you wouldn't have taken, it moves the needle. Another example that came to mind was I used to see the ads for those air purifier things everywhere. And I'm like, why do I need an air purifier? And now we've got them everywhere. like they sold out. I'm seeing ads like they're back in stock. And I can't imagine them having gone out of stock last year.
Right. And an entrepreneur, I mean, this is the most pedestrian of change, but these days, but the president of Entrepreneur, I had so many tense discussions with him about this pre-pandemic. He just could not accept that people could work from home and be productive. He just just couldn't accept it. Wanted to see people in the office. And now, guess who loves working from home? He does. Loves it. Like, we're getting rid of our office. We're not going to have an office after this. Why would we need an office? I've been saying for a long time, there's no reason for it. Let's get rid of this stupid thing. We can do it all digitally. It's fine. We'll meet at coffee shops. It doesn't matter. And it's great, right? That's a reconsideration of the impossible. That option was always available to us, and we just didn't take it.
Yeah. So certain people in an organization will resist change. And, maybe there was a resistance to getting rid of the office before, but say you want to make a change as a leader. How do you bring the rest of the group along with you on that change?
So I think the reason why people fear change often is because loss is so much easier to see than gain. So whenever change is coming, right? I mean, just think about it for our own time. You could go back to the teddy bear as a fine example. So you see loss. It's immediate. Here's a new thing. It's going to fit into our world. It's going to reduce or replace something else. They saw girls not playing with dolls as much. That was a loss, an identifiable loss. Whether or not it was an actual loss is another question, but they were seeing something. And so they were extrapolating out the loss. And that's often what we do, because loss is so much easier to see than gain. And so what we as leaders need to do is help people see immediately what the gain is. Why am I doing this? What are we going to get from it? Lead me there so that I don't focus on the loss. So I don't say, oh, I knew how to do this and I had a role. I understood my role in this organization and exactly how to do my job. And now you're starting me at zero again, and I don't know how I fit in, and my value, all the cachet that I built up is gone. So you need to show me, don't just tell me that there's change coming and that it's going to be good. Show me exactly where the gain is. And even if you don't know it, and that's fine, because we can't possibly anticipate what all the gain is. We didn't know what teddy bears were going to turn out to be. We can at least have an understanding of where we're going to go and how everybody can benefit. And I think the more that people, this is really another way of saying that you have to really have a strong vision and be able to get people to go along with it. But I think the thing that people need is an understanding for themselves personally of what the gain is, because otherwise they are going to default to the loss, because the loss is so much easier to see. And you can always, always, always extrapolate out from the loss. Now, when we do that, and I've studied the history of this stuff, every time that there's a change, every time there's some new innovation, we extrapolate out the loss in a kind of crazy way that makes absolutely no sense, but there's a logic to it at the time. And we're doing this now. Go listen to Tristan Harris talk about how social media is checkmate on humanity, right? That's so ridiculously absurd, but that's extrapolation of the loss because it's harder to see the gain.
I've never heard that question answered so perfectly, that it's just the understanding of the gain is smaller than your aversion to the loss. And if you can understand it personally and help people with the good vision, then you can overcome change. So well said. Thank you for that. Now, the journalism world has undergone a ton of change. And at Entrepreneur, you've got the online version, you've got the paper version. A lot of publications have moved just online. So what has caused you guys to maintain the magazine?
Well, there's a number of reasons we're doing it. One, it still makes money, right? So it's not, we're not throwing money into a bonfire here. It's not the primary economic driver of a company, as I don't think any print magazine is for any media company, but it still makes money. And I think that more importantly, you have to be constantly thinking about anything that you're doing in an organization or really in life. I think, what is this for? And it can be that answer can change, right? So the reason why I do what if I'm doing something, if I'm creating something, what is it for? It might be for something at one point, and now it's for a different thing, and that's fine. So I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean by that. So very specifically at Entrepreneur, the print magazine, I love props, right? So the print magazine, what is it for? Well, a long time ago, what it was for was that it was the primary way to reach readers. It was the only way to reach readers at some point, and it was the primary product of the company. And the company made other products, events, and books and whatever. But this was the primary product. Now it makes money. It doesn't make as much money as it used to. So what's it for, aside from that it makes some money? Well, I would say the answer is it's the greatest marketing tool that this company has. That's what it's for, right? Because having a print magazine today, and this might change in 10 or 20 years, who knows, but right now, having a print magazine still gives a brand more cachet. Right?
Yeah.
We still feel more legit. And also you can go to a newsstand in an airport, again, back in like normal times, you're looking to hop on a plane and you got some time to kill and you see entrepreneur and you get it. And like that matters. It also is a really strong entry point for large talent. So we're able to work with very large talent. So for example, like, you know, the fastest I ever got somebody on the cover, because our cover fell apart. This was like a year or two ago. Our cover fell apart with like 2 weeks to go before ship. And I was like, I was losing sleep. And somebody suggested Kevin Hart, which I had always thought would be really cool. But I was like, oh my God, getting Kevin Hart is going to take like forever. Because sometimes getting a celebrity could take years, literally, to get a celebrity onto your cover. And but as it turns out, Kevin thinks of himself as an entrepreneur, very much is. Like Kevin Hart is in the office. Like he has an office and pre-pandemic, is like in the office most days of the week. He like tours and does stand up on the weekend, but he's like he's an entrepreneur. And so he was like ready to go. He loved the idea. And so we like threw together everything, got a reporter in front of him, got a photo shoot. And we like did it, right? Now that just doesn't happen with a website. It just doesn't. Because it's too easy to publish something on the web, right? It's like, it's the easiest thing in the world to publish. And yet print magazine, there are layers and layers of things that have to happen, and it creates a kind of legitimacy. And so I think that the magazine right now is for a lot of things. It serves a different kind of reader. It serves the brand in a really significant way. It's a marker. It's an entry point. But I have been thinking, and I think that I'm ahead of the industry on this, because this is just not how the industry thinks right now, but in trying to think, what is content for? And I despise the word content, but I will use it for lack of a better term. Like, what is content for? And the answer used to be content is the thing that we monetize. And I actually, that is still true, right? Like the majority of any media brand's revenue right now, ours included, comes from advertising against the content in some form or another. But I think that we're moving away from that to a point where it's harder and harder to monetize the content. So what is the content for? And I think the answer is that it's for relationships. Like the content builds trust and it builds authority. And it builds a relationship with an audience. And then once it does that, you can create products and services that people are willing to buy because they trust you because of the content. And I think that that's where media companies are eventually going to need to get to, where we've stopped thinking about advertising entirely. Who cares about it? Because it's up and it's down and it's too annoying, right? Instead, why don't we think about products and services that we can serve an audience, and the content that we create is our proof positive to that audience that we're trustworthy and we know what we're talking about, and that's why you should come to us. So that's what the content is for. And I think that's going to shift.
So interesting. So I was going to ask you, some people gate their content. Some just run on advertising. If you fast forward 10 years, what do you think the monetization model is? It's products and services that you create?
I think it is. I think that it's products and services that you create. And I think that the content might actually start to feel like a product in the way that like a book is a product, right? So you might gate the product, but it's not because you're experiencing it the way that we are now, where, you just like go to a website and you run into a paywall, but instead, maybe you've subscribed to the growth plan or something. And the growth plan has this very well organized set of content that you're going to consume at a particular pace, and it's going to be curated and you're going to be walked through it, right? It's not going to be the way it is now, where it's just like publish, right? It's going to be instead more thoughtfully productized. I think that's where we're going to go. I think it's where we're going to have to go. And when I say we, again, I'm not just talking about entrepreneur. I think that's where the entire media industry has to go.
I think there's going to be an AI or something that scans my calendar and sees what meetings I have and then suggests articles from your whole archives. That's like, this is the article you need to read right now.
That's a great idea. And so then the smarter thing for a media company to do is not wait to be like the secondary element of that, but instead build that AI so that we're helping you manage your day and we're constantly providing all this content that's going to help you along.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I know there's probably been a pressure to produce more content because people are, 24/7 connected and have just this insatiable demand. So how have you ramped up your production of media, of articles over the years?
So we just launched. It's interesting. We just launched what we call the Entrepreneur Leadership Network on our website. So most business publications, ourselves included, have two kinds of production of content that you're seeing. One is what's produced by staff. Sorry. And then the other is what's produced by contributors. And contributors are generally entrepreneurs who are writing in their own expertise, and they're providing value to other entrepreneurs through the platform. And they want to do that, of course, because it's a good brand management tool for them, right? Like they can get out there and position themselves as an expert. And so they're very happy to do it. And we used to do that we used to do that before, but we did it in a kind of crazy, complicated way where people didn't exactly know how to get in and who to contact, and like we're getting a million pitches. So we created this thing called Entrepreneur Leadership Network. People apply, they have to be interviewed and accepted, and then once they are, they can contribute to the site on different tiers. There's a free tier, just like right for the site, but then also if you want a lot of editorial help and also you want the ability to post more, which just takes more resources on our part, there's a small fee that basically covers those resources to enable that. And if anybody's interested in what that is, then there it is. So this is, I just tapped, so in the chat there, I just, what I did, this is one of my favorite time-saving tools. If you have a question that lots of people are constantly asking you, then, which for me is always how to write for the site. It's like the thing that 40 times a day people are asking me. You can create keyword shortcuts if you have an iPhone that'll then also work for your MacBook. So I go in this keyword shortcut. I just typed CCC and up pops that whole thing. Hey, thanks for the interest. We just launched a new, right? And then I have another one. DDD is basically a nice way of saying that I'm not going to get on the phone with you. And these are like, it's really. I was
going to say you're like the fastest typer I've ever known. It's just and it's in.
Yeah, CCC.
Cool.
So anyway, so you can click on that link.
All right. Awesome. So everybody check that out if you're interested in contributing. Now, I've heard you talk in the past about permanent beta, and this is a kind of it's a chat about change and future growth. So how can people stay in this mindset of beta?
Yeah, so permanent beta is not my own phrase. I ripped that off from Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, Great Luck Ventures. And he says, and I love it, that people need to live in permanent beta, which is to say, think of yourself as a product that is never finished, always changing, right? I mean, the great thing about the idea of permanent beta is about the kind of permission and shame-freeness of it, because I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm too old or too established or too whatever to like be going through this change. And yet there's no shame in updating a product that's in beta. A product that's in beta is supposed to be updated. The whole point of it is to put something out there and get feedback and then update the thing. So if you think of yourself in that way, well, then the only natural thing to do is to be constantly adding to yourself and changing. And I think that's a really valuable way of thinking about it. And, the way that I think people can get into that mindset, aside from, you come from the future, which is the way that I often offer it, is to be mindful that the change is coming, like the change, we're constantly around change. And in fact, the moments of greatest change, although they feel the most disruptive, are also the moments of greatest progress. I think the reason why so many people are going to come out of this moment, and I don't mean to dismiss the terrible tragedies and loss that a lot of people have felt, but during this time, but what I'm hearing from a lot of entrepreneurs is a kind of great reinvention that they are ultimately very happy with. They've gone through, my theory is that we've all gone through 4 stages together. So there was panic, we knew panic, and then there was adaptation, and then there was new normal. And then I think we are getting into, and some people are already there and others we need to get them there, wouldn't go back. And wouldn't go back is we've made some kind of change that's so valuable to us that when the world goes back to whatever normal is, that we're going to carry this change with us into the future, and we don't want to go back to a time before it. And the moments of great change are ones that create unbelievable moments of wouldn't go back. I had fun history fact. So that the teddy bear isn't the only completely random thing that I tell you today. So when all this was starting in like March, April, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know how serious it was. I just got to wondering. I was like, what is the worst thing that I can think of? And then did something good come out of it? And so I thought about the bubonic plague of the 1300s. And I was like, did something good come out of the bubonic plague? And so I called this guy named Andrew Rabin, who's a medieval scholar at the University of Louisville. And I asked him, and he gave me like a whole bunch of really fascinating examples of great things that came out of the bubonic plague, but just one short, interesting one. So that feels very relevant to us all. So medieval Europe, you might remember from high school, was a lord and serf system. The lords owned the land. They owned the serfs worked the land. The serfs did not get paid. It was slavery. And then the bubonic plague comes along and it kills up to 60% of Europe. And then once that is done, all the lords say, well, okay, it's time to get back to work. And they go to the serfs and they're like, time to get back to work. And as it turns out, there are not enough serfs for all the lords anymore, which means that multiple lords are now going to the serfs and saying, work for me, work for me. And the serfs realize, wait a second, I'm able to ask for compensation now. And thus is born the very beginning of the employment contract as we know it. The idea that labor has a value and that value should be paid to the person who does the work. The idea of the modern economy that we are all going to work and get paid for that work that we are all basically here for right now, the thing that binds all of us, comes out of the bubonic plague. And terrible things happened in the bubonic plague, obviously. I'm not saying we want the bubonic plague, but I am saying that when you look at what came out of it, you would say, wouldn't want to go back. Wouldn't want to go back to a time before that. And that's what moments of great change can lead to.
Wow. All right. So history will tell that looking back on this year, 2020 marked the change of a time when we wouldn't want to go back to pre-pandemic. And now we just have to wait and figure out what it is, I guess, right?
I think that's exactly right.
Okay. So we've got some great questions that came in here. I want to make sure we've got time for those. So why don't I start to run through these? Let's see. John Bird says, how do you know when it's time to reinvent the wheel for how you do business? I'm in financial services, life insurance, and investments, and things have been done the same way forever.
I mean, I think that the answer is, one of the answers is extrapolate outward, right? I mean, if you see some kind of change coming, if you are starting to see the impact of it in any small way, or you just know that it's going to happen, extrapolate outward. Tell me what's going to happen if you don't change, and the thing that you see changing is going to continue, which of course it's going to. Tell me what happens in 5 or 10 years. And if the answer is I'm still on top because exactly what we're doing is going to continue to work for XYZ reasons, then I guess, keep on going. People love buying hot dogs today as much as they did 50 years ago. But like, if you are not going to be on top, then you need to make some kind of change. And that can be really hard, but you have to change before you must. I mean, I said this earlier, right? Like Blockbuster, a classic example of this. They weren't idiots. They knew that change was coming. But the thing is that they just couldn't do anything about it. They were structurally unable to do something about it. But the entrepreneurs who I've talked to, who I'm most impressed with, are the ones who saw change coming like a mile away or 10 miles away. And they made some kind of change that was painful in the short term, but then but it helped them in the long term. And I've seen that over and over again. I mean, my favorite one, which I'll try to give you like the 10-second version of, was Dogfish, the brewing company, where they had a beer, an IPA that was going absolute gangbusters. It was going to become 80% of all sales of their business. And Sam, the owner of Dogfish, realized this was a terrible thing for his business because although he would sell a ton of beer in the short term, he would become identified as an IPA brand. And then the second that IPAs stopped being as popular as they were, he's just going to be an old brand. So he capped sales of his best selling beer at 50%, even though it could have been 80% of all sales of the company. People were furious at him. They were just like screaming at him on the street. And Sam is like Beyonce in Delaware, which is where the company, people just love him. And so they were so angry, but he rode through it. And basically every time somebody came to him and was like, why are you not giving me this beer? He was like, why don't you try this other beer? We make the beer really fresh. We don't have it available. Why don't you try our Saison or whatever it was? And that's how Dogfish became an innovative brand instead of an old IPA brand. And that's how it sold for $300 million last year. And these are the kinds of things that you have to do proactively. Otherwise, you're just going to be reacting to the change. And at that point, it's already done.
I love the quote you said, you have to change before you must. That's that'll be posted on social, I'm sure, after this. All right. I know you joked about Fast Company writing about Elon, what he eats for breakfast or something, but Zach here said, what's your biggest takeaway from interviewing Elon Musk and how has it impacted you? So you're still.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't interviewed Elon. I've interviewed a lot of these big guys, but I haven't interviewed Elon. But so I'll give you one time I did see, so I'm in Boulder now, as I said, pre-pandemic, I went to, Elon's brother has a restaurant here, and we went to the restaurant and I saw Elon across the room with a very hip looking group of people. And for like a hot second, I was like, I should go over and introduce myself. And then I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I haven't met him, but I'll tell you, Richard Branson. So I talked to Richard Branson and I asked him, what is it that enabled Virgin to get into so many industries? Like, Virgin is an indefinable company. It's everything. It's an airline. It's a cruise line. It's a music. It was a million different things. Space now. How did he do that? And he said that every other company hires people, and then I guess this is a Britishism, I don't know, asks them to stick to their onions. So in other words, like hire somebody for what they know how to do and then ask them to stick to it. And what he has done throughout his career is hire people and then encourage them to go explore things that they don't know anything about, and then bring those ideas back to him and make the case that this is something that they should get into. And if he's sold on it, then he's going to do it. And so when you create that kind of culture where people don't stick to their onions and instead they go out and they explore, what you're doing is incentivizing your entire team to constantly be thinking out of the box and then bringing you opportunities that you yourself hadn't thought of. And that's how Virgin did what it did. I
love that. Okay, last question here for now is from Monica. Can you recommend any kind of book that's inspired you the most?
So it's so funny. I'm working on a book myself right now, but I have read almost no business books. I don't really like business books, to be perfectly honest with you. So I never have a good recommendation for this question until my book is out, and then I'm just going to keep recommending my own book.
Well, what's your book? Tell us about your book.
It's not, we're actually just about to go out to market with it. So my agent is like prepping it, and we're days away. Oh, here's my kids are coming home, as you can see over there. But anyway, but the tentative title is, it should be No Same Onions for us. This tentative title is You Come from the Future, for obvious reasons. And, love that. And so I'm excited to share that. And by the way, for anybody, I'll just say for anybody who like wants to stay up on that stuff, I'm going to just type in see, there's my 5-year-old who definitely, hi.
Double thumbs up or down.
So go to jasonpfeiffer.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'll keep you posted on all this stuff. I have a newsletter that's all about change and how to find opportunity in change. So please go check that out. And also my podcast, and I will go to like recommending somebody else's stuff, but now I'm just log rolling for myself. So you have to stick with it. So the podcast Pessimist Archive, I'm actually going to change the name because it sounds obviously pessimistic, and it's just been giving people the wrong impression. And I found that although we have a really great audience, it's also a barrier to entry for a lot of people. So we're going to change the name. I'm not exactly sure what to do, but if you follow Pessimist Archive right now, you subscribe, you'll be able to get, you'll be able to follow along. But anyway, the teddy bear and the bubonic plague, all that stuff, my study of change throughout history, all comes from that podcast. So again, that's called Pessimist's Archive, in case anybody wants to throw that into the chat. So I'm going to tell you this is the stuff that I'll give you 2 podcast recommendations because I'm super into podcasts instead of books. One that's business and one that's just like completely bonkers. So the one that's business is there's a podcast. It's done now, but it was called Startup, and it's produced by Gimlet. Gimlet is now owned by Spotify. So there's probably a million startups podcast called Startup, but if you just go to the one Startup by Gimlet, so here I'm going to do Startup by Gimlet, and then listen to the first season. The rest is fine or whatever, but the first season is magic. So the first season is, so there's a guy named Alex Blumberg who used to be at This American Life, and then he co-created Planet Money, and then he left to start his own podcast company called Gimlet, and he recorded everything. So he recorded his very awkward attempts at fundraising. He recorded getting his co-founder and then having the very tense conversation about an equity split with his co-founder. He recorded conversations with his wife in which they were like worried about their finances as he leaves a steady job. And he has it all and shares it all. It is the most raw, insightful thing that I have ever heard about entrepreneurship. It's unbelievable. So go like the first season of Startup, go listen to that. You'll never hear anything else like it. And then the other thing that is completely unrelated is the thing that I love actually, instead of listening to things that are just sort of informational about things that I'm interested in, I tend to like to see how people push barriers. So, I create podcasts, I create magazines. I love seeing greatness executed beyond boundaries that I have thought about. That's what I've always been excited about. And so when I read, one of my favorite books is the Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, which is just historical fiction and set in Japan, 1799. It's just beautiful, but the way that its story is told is it's unlike anything that I'd seen, and it inspires me. And so anyway, but there's this podcast that if you're just like looking to escape everything, it's called Richard's Famous Food Podcast. It is barely about food. It is basically like listening to a cartoon. Like there's just no way to describe it. It is the most bonkers, crazy thing that you've ever heard. This guy is so forward thinking in how he produces and tells stories. And I listen to it and it just makes me think the thing I'm making is from 1924. Like I need to like push. I love listening to that stuff. So there are two things that are not books that you asked for.
And they're probably the most unique examples. I'm sure nobody else would be recommending Richard's Famous Food Podcast. So I appreciate the unique.
You bet. And then also just, there in the chat is Pessimist Archive. My
perfect. And whatever it ends up being called. All right. So last couple of questions here to round out the show. I'm curious, we're in this time where the playing field has kind of been leveled. Big companies, small companies, everybody's dealing with this stuff. And in some ways it's affecting the big companies more because they're not as nimble and they can't change as quickly. And so for small companies that are, a couple employees, 10 employees, a couple dozen, wherever they are, and they're feeling really impacted by this year, what kind of message would you leave them with to be, I guess, not pessimistic?
Well, listen, I mean, yes, I think that this is going to be a harder time for a lot of big companies than small companies because moments of change are moments of uprooting incumbents. I mean, they just are. The bigger you are, the more entrenched you are. I mean, this is, there's a great Harvard Business Review piece about why big companies stop innovating. And the answer is because they at some point in your life cycle as a company, you shift away from innovation and you start moving towards efficiency, which means that everybody's job is to do the thing that they're already doing more and more efficiently so that you can do it for cheaper and faster and over again. And that means that there is no longer an incentive structure inside of your company to adapt and change because everybody's KPIs are all around efficiency. And that means that you can like blockbuster your way into the ground. That's just sort of how it works, right? So I would say, look around. Are you at an organization or are you running an organization that has efficiencyed itself to death? And if so, make some change if you can in the organization, or make some change in your career if you need to. But are you in an organization that is structured for change? If so, then I would say embrace that and just go with push and see where the boundaries are, because I would guarantee you that there are new boundaries out there. I mean, at Entrepreneur, there are new boundaries all the time. I'm discovering, I mean, the things that we're doing on the cover are completely different from, I I put 137 people on the cover one month. This was in July. I've never done anything. This is ridiculous. Nobody would have ever said yes to this, but people loved it. It was like a gigantic explosion on social media because we put 137 people on the cover, which means there were 137 people who were able to say that they were on the cover. Like, it was amazing, right? So like, where are the new boundaries? I think that oftentimes what we do, we're like dogs with those electric collars, right? You like get shocked enough times at the boundary and then you never cross the boundary. But the thing is, like, the electric collar isn't shocking anymore. We're all still staying oftentimes like where we thought the boundary was, but that's not where the boundary is anymore. Like, there's a dawning realization that change has to happen. That if you are in an organization, you have to start reconsidering the impossible. As I say, this is the only way to survive. And so I would say, figure out where the new boundaries are, push them, establish them yourself if you can. There's a lot of opportunity now, but it won't happen unless you go out there yourself and try to find it.
I love that. Such a great tip and a great analogy, actually. The dog with the getting shocked. Where are you afraid to get shocked? Go to that limit and figure out if it's still shocking. I think that's such a great tip to end this out. So, Jason, man, thank you so much. The idea that we are from the future, I think will stick with everybody. Can't wait to read your book when that comes out. But thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody. Feel free to get in touch. I respond to everything, unless you're just pitching me, and then I'm going to CC you. Sign up for my newsletter, the podcast. If you want to find me at Hey Pfeiffer on Instagram, I respond to DMs. I post those bad pitches. Anyway, lots of ways to get in touch. I hope you will.
Thanks, Jason.
Hey, thank you.
A couple of takeaways for you guys. First, you can start building your playbook today. We've talked about this throughout, but we built a bunch of templates that you can download. You can sign up and check those out. Just go to trainyo.com/playbook templates. Also, as we promised, all of this was recorded and we'll be sending that out tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. There will be links to the recordings. I'm also doing some bonus interviews. We had a bunch of speakers that just couldn't fit in today. So there'll be extra interviews that we're sending out next week with a full recap. So stay tuned for more on that. And also, we'd love to stay connected to you. So this is Jonathan and I in the Matrix, I guess, or whatever this picture is.
This is our Tekken Mortal Kombat promo shoot.
Mortal Kombat. So that's all of our info there with phone numbers. If you want to text us, our handles are the same on all these platforms: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you thought of this. What did you think of the speeches, the conversations, the takeaways? What are you going to implement in your business? Let us know, and we'll be happy to share your takeaways with our audience. But this has been amazing.
Really hope that when you sign off right now, you feel like you did get the playbook for your business.
And that's what it's all about. So thank you for joining Playbook 2020. Again, thousands of you signed up to be here. We're so grateful that you spent the day with us, and we are going to do this again. So stay tuned for 2021. In whatever form that event takes place, you will know about it. And we can't wait to see you guys next time. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.